Amazing. Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this live broadcast. I have with me three amazing guests, and I am sure that throughout this hour, you will get to learn more about them and what they do. But by way of introduction, I am Leisa Grace Wilson, Editorial Director of Teach Middle East magazine, former school leader, and now I do all things education. Wherever it takes me, that's where I go. With me today, I have Circa Coyle, and she is the founder of Empowering Expat Teachers. Circa, go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, everyone. So I have been an expat teacher for the last 10 years, and I also have a business where I work with future and current expat teachers to help them have personally, professionally, and financially rewarding lives. And I'm based in Dubai, and I'm very excited to be here. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. And we also have with us Jonathan Price, who is the Director of Recruitment for eTeach International, a very well-known brand in the education space. Jonathan, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, Lisa, and welcome to everyone who's joined us today. A little bit of my background. I've been in the region for a long time. I won't disclose how many years, but a number. What brought me here was senior leadership within schools. I have been a principal of a very successful school in Dubai for 10 years, and then decided on I'm not even going to say career change, just a change in direction, because one of the things I used to enjoy doing was recruiting staff for my own school. And some of the feedback I got from people that either got the job or didn't get the job was always very positive. And I thought, well, how can I take this and help schools not only in this region, but anywhere on the international circuit to source quality candidates, prepare teachers for that journey in their life and the adventure that international teaching brings. And it's not just teaching, but school leaders and everybody else associated with the education field. So similar to how Grace said, we work in all realms all over the world.
Welcome, Jonathan. It's such a good privilege to have you. And we also have with us Suleiman Akbar, who is the principal of Bright Learners Private School in Dubai. Welcome, Suleiman.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. And welcome to our other wonderful guests. And I think it's recruiting season now. So at the end of this, I might need both of your services. But anyway, so I'm at Bright Learners Private School. I've been in Dubai for, I think this is my 6th year now. And I've been in education for over 20 years, starting in New York City, then Atlanta, and now in Dubai. I have a wonderful school, Bright Learners Private School. It's a new school, small school, but enrollment is open. And we are looking to take on new students and the challenge of becoming a great school in Dubai. So thank you for having me.
You are welcome. So we have assembled, as you guys can see, a really great panel of people to answer your questions in helping you secure your next teaching role. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into the questions and just get this started. But before I go further, I'd like to invite all our people watching, if you have questions at the end, we will take questions and hopefully we will get through as many of them as we possibly can. Now, Circa, you have kind of moved out of the classroom recently and transitioned into doing, I'd say, work that it's in education. So more of your passions, you're fulfilling some of your passions. How do you know, right, as a teacher, that it's time to look for a new role? Like, how do you know it's time?
So look for a new role or like change career? You mean look for a new
So
role?
first, a new role.
So in terms of looking for a new role, I think really a big sign is if you're unhappy. You're going to school every day, you're dreading it. You're not maybe feeling inspired by colleagues, by leadership. Perhaps you are, really craving new challenges. Perhaps you feel your skills and talents aren't being not exploited, but aren't being really used fully in your job. And even though maybe you've expressed that to people in charge, it's still nothing really has changed. So I think that for me would be now is time to start looking for a new role.
Yeah, we're not gonna get people out of the classroom just yet and talk about change of careers. I think I think it's also important to think about when do you know, and I'm going to put this to Suleiman, when do you know as a teacher that it's time to look for a promoted role, like to move up in the ranks as a teacher?
Absolutely, and that's kind of the way I received the question when I heard it. And I think it's basically when you feel like you have done everything that you can at the position you're in. You've been there for a while, you've worked really hard, you saw progress, you know that you're an effective teacher, and you're like, okay, I've mastered this. Now, what's the next level? How can I challenge myself to be the next level, whether that is HOD, some type of middle leader, or straight to principalship, or even assessment coordinator. There's a variety of positions and roles between middle and senior leadership that are available to successful and effective teachers. So once you feel like you have mastered your role and you're ready for that next challenge, I think that's when it's time.
Yeah, yeah. And so, Jonathan, before they even think of, once they know it's time to move, whether it's to a promoted role or it's to another role in another school, what should they start thinking about before they even touch their CV?
The sort of role that they're looking for. I would like to add to what the original question was, and to me, it's all about impact. A lot of teachers who are career driven will look at making an impact in each of their roles, and that impacts, in some schools it's quite easy to have an impact because it's very obvious of certain things that you can bring to that position that make a difference to the teaching and learning within your immediate class. As you go further up the higher order of teaching and moving up into the management, so your impact within a school gets bigger. So I think what you need to do before you start moving and looking into a new school is look at the impact you've had on your current school. A lot of teachers and the way in which structures are interviewed and things, it's no longer theoretical. It's all about what have you done in your current role and the impact that you've had. And it's important to start thinking of, while you're in that current school, what you did with that English. Let's say you're an elementary stroke primary teacher, what you did with your English when you identified that the reading levels in your classroom weren't quite what they should have been. What did you do about it? What did you approach the leadership team with as an idea to try? That's what schools are looking for, is people who have had an impact and made a difference. So it's important, I would say, that while you're still in your current comfortable environment, look at the things that you've achieved in the time that you've been there and literally start jotting them down, and speak to colleagues and ask your colleagues, say, right, you know me, I'm a good teacher, and we've worked in grade 4 for the last 3 years or in the maths department for the last 2 years. What would you say are my best qualities? How have I developed? How have I helped you? What have you been able to do? What couldn't you have done if I wasn't here? And all of those are things that I think it's far easier trying to do that in your current role than moving on. So that would I'd sum all that up as one word: impact.
I like that, impact, because I think before you even start to look at your CV, you really do need to think about the impact that you've made. And I also wonder why people don't put a lot more impact statements on their CVs rather than just kind of list out the job specs of the job they currently have or jobs they had previously. But I want to turn it back to Sorka. Now, if they're ready to do their CV, what can they do to make sure their CV stands out? Because there will be loads of CVs coming at people like Suleiman, and he has to sift through them. And he wants to make sure that that CV he's picking up is the right CV. What can you do to make sure your CV is the right one?
Well, first of all, totally agree with what Jonathan says about knowing your strengths, like your unique selling points almost. I do think if you're coming from maybe Ireland or UK, where our schools were, maybe state schools, we didn't necessarily have to network or sell ourselves. But I think when you come internationally, it is a bit different. And I think then that you really have to make sure on your CV, it kind of catches the eye of the head teacher from the get-go. So really in the first third of your CV, you should have a clear idea of what your strengths are. And like Jonathan said, go and speak to your colleagues and ask them, because oftentimes you don't realize how great you are. Think about what people at school ask you for help with. What are you always asked to help out with? What have you been like praised for, complimented? Think about all your observations, any feedback you've received. They're all your sort of unique strengths. And also even as a person, you're like more soft skills, like who you are as a person. And what I would say, it's really important to research the school beforehand, because you need to make sure that the school abroad aligns with your goals, aligns with your talents, aligns with your personal, professional goals. And so that's really important, because I'll give you an example. Like, if you've some teachers who are really amazing at teaching students with English second language, and perhaps they're applying to schools that don't have very many students with English as second language, there's a bit of a disconnect there, possibly, if their passion is English second language, So it's just really making sure you know the school, you know your strengths, and you make them stand out so that they kind of catch the eye of the head teacher straight away. And also, to show that you've done your research on the school, the demographic, the mission or vision of the school, the head teacher. So you've like been on LinkedIn, you've looked up the website, you've sifted through it, that passion. If you love the school, you want to get a job there, and you'd be an amazing fit and you contribute so much, that will come through in the CV. But just make sure you have it really in the first kind of third is the most important part.
Yeah. I wonder, that those are really good points. And I want to ask Suleiman this question. When you're looking at CVs, what's a massive turn off for you?
A massive turn off?
Turn off, like you're like,
Right.
I don't want to see this, I'm putting it in the bin.
I think, well, there's plenty, and I've definitely have seen a lot that I wanted to throw in the bin. I would say making sure that your spelling is correct. Any grammatical errors, I'm not even going to get to the bottom. If I see that your experience is jumping around from school to school to school to school, for the last 5 years, you've been in 5 schools, then that's not a good thing. If there's a big gap in your employment, so if you've been out of work for 5-6 years, that's also a turnoff, because you may not be up to date with what's happening. And you have to make sure the employer knows what has been going on in those gaps. Okay, so I think those, or not qualified. I've received CVs where the candidate doesn't even have the proper credentials for the role. So I think it's very important that you know exactly what you're applying for. You know that this role is whatever it is. I need to have this experience. I need to have this certification. I need to have that before I even send the CV for the role.
Yeah. Jonathan, you recruit thousands and thousands of teachers. What would you say to a teacher before they even start to put the application in? What would you say to them to help them to prepare a CV that's worthy that you can put in front of a principal as a potential candidate for that school?
Again, it's replicating what Sorka said. It's do your homework. Look at what that school is requiring at that time. If you can, it depends on the position you're going for. If you're going for a class teaching position, or if you're going for a principal role, there's a huge disparity in how you prepare for that. Look at the data that is around for that school. So if it's a school in Dubai and it's been inspected by the KHDA, for example, have a look at what the report is saying about that school. How does the school then fit into what you're looking for in your next step for your career? I would say, that there are many schools out there. There are platforms that allow teachers to voice their opinion on certain schools. I'm not going to name any, but we are all able to nod and know what I'm talking about. And, it's worth looking at those, but take on board that the people that may be writing those may have had a different journey at that school at that time. So don't just take that on board as a negative process about that school, but do your research and find out, is this the sort of school that will allow you to grow for the next step? Because you should always look at your next job as, where am I going after that one?
I think I heard someone says you should look 3 schools ahead.
Yes. I mean, but sometimes, I mean, it's okay in theory doing that, but you can fall in love with a school. And you can just think, I want to do the best that I can and I may be here for 10 years, 15 years, and still every day is a learning day, not a complacency, teaching approach where, just because I know what's in every cupboard, I'm still not trying to develop myself. So yeah, I would say, that make sure that school can meet your needs. It's a two-way process. I often describe it when I'm speaking to candidates, it's a marriage that, this partner has to accept what this partner is bringing to the table, and this partner has to accept what this one's capable of bringing to the table. And it's a two-way process. It's not all about, right, they just need a teacher and I'm just going to get a salary because I want to go and party in Dubai.
Fair point. I want to just pause here to just tell our viewers that, yes, I am seeing all of your questions, but I do have to hold them until the end of the broadcast so that we can answer them. So please stick around until the end, and we will definitely be answering your questions. So we've been talking CVs, and CVs are great, but wonder, are there unconventional ways, Sorka, that teachers can present their qualifications and their skills apart from just box standard CV that gets sent in via email, etc.?
What I would say is I am a fan of the traditional CV, I have to say. I'm not, sometimes people get these beautiful things maybe from Canva and it's like one-page resume and it's all served together in different colors. That can be sometimes hard for people to read, especially if maybe head teachers are more traditional. They may not, so just bear that in mind. I think a clear format will always work, but things you can do definitely to stand out. I mean, LinkedIn, network more in LinkedIn. That's sort of happening now in the last few years, I feel, in international education. I'd also say I know a lot of teachers have online portfolios. So it's so free, free to set up a website. You can set up a Google site and upload pictures of your work, student work you've done. It could be photos of initiative that you're in if you're appeared in local media. It could be you teaching a lesson or a section of a lesson, obviously with the back of the camera, so students aren't, it's privacy for students. But there's lots of ways, because you can just hyperlink it and then put it in your CV, and then someone can just click on it and then get a much better picture of your unique skills and talents. Is what I would say. I know a lot of people, I've heard of PE teachers doing that, more practical subjects. It's, but it can work for any subject really to have an online portfolio. If you're mentioned in the media, local media for a sports day or, something that you worked with students and they won competitions, I'd include all that too, links to that, because that's all real life proof of your achievements as an educator.
Yeah. Yes, Suleiman.
The part you mentioned about recorded lessons. Okay, so we've just been through COVID and we're still in COVID. So there was a time we were all distance learning. So, and it's continuing to this day. So I would say teachers share recorded lessons of some masterful teaching. If you can put that, as she said, as a link on your CV, so that the headmaster can, or the principal can get access and see you in live teaching, whether it's remotely or in person. That would be a huge benefit, and that'll actually propel you out ahead of just a plain CV. So actually seeing it in action, and like Jonathan said, impact, seeing a classroom instruction that is effective. Students are learning. It's clear. It's concise. You've shown your knowledge and understanding of your subject. I think that is a big boost for teachers, and is easily accessible now.
But I have a little wonder about that, though, because how much can you really show? We have lots of, there's a lot of safeguarding issues around that, where you can't show the students, you can't show certain pieces of their work and things of that nature. It's not allowed. So essentially what the recruiter might just see is just you making presentations to your class, but not really seeing the impact of how the students respond to you, of how they actually go off and come back and report the work that they've done as a result of your instructions. That's going to be missing. So I'm just wondering the effectiveness on that. What's your thoughts on that, Jonathan?
Oh, I agree. I mean, I had a conversation yesterday with a teacher, and he just sent through a CV, and that's exactly what we were focusing on, because he'd put hyperlinks there with students. And I said, have you got permission from the parents of each one of those students to use this? And he said, no. And I said, well, you shouldn't really be broadcasting this on a CV that you're going to send off to, 5, 10, 20 schools. Or, I mean, people should not have access to that. And he said, oh, I didn't think of that. And I said, well, he said, so what can I put in it then? And I said, well, the only person you can show is you. I said, possibly if you've got interaction with another adult in the class, but even then you still need that person's permission as well. But again, so it is very difficult to show that sort of didactic nature of, performance, where you're interacting with your audience, your pupils for this, for this video, and their reactions and their enthusiasm. You can't show that. So I agree totally, Leisa, with what you're saying there, that, the impact is limited. I think people were starting to ask a lot about video lessons when sort of 18 months ago, when COVID was first coming in, and people realized that they couldn't go and take trips all over the place and hire people face to face and watch people teach in, say, a school in the UK or a school wherever they were interviewing. The interview panel had assembled. So the impact has really been toned back. I think it was starting to gain a lot of momentum 18 months ago in the video interview and the video evidence, but I think it's now come back to a realization point that we just need to gauge things on what we know and pick up on the references, and have that interaction to judge the personality of the person at the interview stage, rather than having a look at video lessons. And again, it's with what Sorka was saying, the idea of the practical side, the arts, the drama, the technical subjects, the DT,
and such,
where you can have things of evidence, portfolios and things. That's a worthwhile attachment to have. But the idea of a video link showing your class performance is not really acceptable, I don't think.
Well, I think it's still relevant because COVID is not over. We are going in and out of distance learning as we go now. Some schools are still just coming out of distance learning, so I think it's still relevant. And I think teachers need to be able to pivot. They need to be great and didactic in the classroom in person, but they also need to be able to do it online, because you never know when you're going to have to shift. So I think video lessons alone may not be enough. You need that total package, like Sorka was saying, but it's still relevant, and I think it still helps. Now, as far as the confidentiality, yes, you can't show students to everyone. But many of my teachers, they were creating a catalog for asynchronous learning. So it's just their recorded lessons. So that can also be very beneficial for a principal to see that. So I think it's still relevant, but it's part of the entire package.
Yes. Yeah. If it's, as you say, if you're delivering an online lesson that's been videoed, then it's you as the teacher that's in front of that camera. But if you're trying to present a video of a lesson delivered in person in a classroom, then that is what I'm saying is not acceptable.
Right. So I can see how it would work in an asynchronous presentation, but I don't know how much, because I'm putting myself back to when I used to hire teachers, and I'm thinking, if you sent me a presentation of yourself just sort of talking to camera, and, I don't know how much of that really I would use as a judgment for your ability to deliver lessons to students and to really inspire learning. I think, yes, I really would agree with Jonathan. I don't know how useful they are. Even though people are saying video lessons, I don't know how very useful they would be right now. I think you would be even better off having that person talk you through exactly how they would deliver a lesson and what they would, and do scenarios. What would you do if a student did this? And what would you do if this happened in your classroom? From their responses, you can more accurately gauge how they would actually respond, because you would be having them under, sort of a quick fire session right there in the interview their ability to think on their feet and to respond, would actually give you a better idea than them talking to camera. So let me, I'm going to bring it back to Jonathan. When we talk about vacancies and where to look, I get CVs thrown at me all the time. I don't hire teachers. I have no kind of job portal or anything like that. But where should teachers look? I know you run a recruitment business, but where should people start?
Well, it depends on proximity to where they are at the moment. Quite often, teachers, we're talking internationally here, but a lot of teachers may want to remain in the city that they're currently working in. So, for example, there's a number of schools in Dubai. So people often hear through word of mouth of the reputation of certain schools. They will be aware of, again, inspection reports that sort of, promote and market certain schools of this level, and this level. They will be aware of the remuneration that certain schools are, offering to teachers. So all of this just becomes, word of mouth, just being on the ground in that city and aware of which school could be my next potential employer. To go beyond that and look outside of the city you're in or the country that you're currently working in, where you may not have that knowledge of the schools. Again, it's looking at organization representation and accreditation to see if those schools are members of external bodies, if there's other schools that are part of a group of schools that operates outside of one country, where that group has a certain standard across all of its operations. So I'm not going to name names, but if there's a uniform approach and that school has that reputation, it works in this country, then that's the sort of schools that I would like to be involved in. So it's looking at individual schools. Also, then you've got job boards where, a lot of schools present their advertising for roles at that particular moment in time. We all know where, which job boards are more popular than others. Schools own websites. A lot of schools have the Join Us, the vacancies, the employment tab, where they will advertise their own positions that they have at that time. And also talking to recruiters. Not all jobs are advertised. And quite often, recruiters are approached to do a job for a school that may not want to advertise that role at this moment in time. So it's speaking with recruitment professionals and logging your CVs and having a conversation about your professional presentation of how you appear to the prospective employer, and having that recruiter ready then to work with you quickly. And that's how I would say that it sort of covers most of those angles on where to find a job.
Yeah, thank you so much. I see your questions as viewers. Please keep them coming. We will answer them. We will try our best to answer them as we end the broadcast. I wanted to go back to Sorka on this question that I've been thinking about quite a bit. How do you go about I know schools have different procedures, let me caveat with that, but how do you go about informing your school that you are thinking of moving on in a way that it doesn't break the relationship? Because I've known of teachers who've told their schools they're leaving and things just became ugly instantly.
Well, like you say, it depends on the school. Probably depends on the leader. I guess usually there's a time frame given by schools that they request that you send in letters of intention. So usually there's a bit of flexibility there if you're not sure. So I would say as much try and stick to those time frames that the school give you, and then then decide if something comes up after. I mean, again, check depending what country you're in. You can, if you haven't signed up for the new contract, it really does depend on the school. I've heard of like some head teachers are quite open, and that, you know, if you're not sure if you're going, they might keep it open for you for a while until you decide. And then some, then if you tell them after the time frame has passed, because obviously they've started recruiting maybe again, it's a bit more of a hassle. I would say try to stick to the time frames and try and your best to keep them updated. I'd say probably open communication is probably the best advice. You know, keep people updated, because if they know, at least then they can have plans, you know, plan B or something. But if you don't keep them up to date with what you're doing, that's maybe where the issue could arise. But I'd be interested to hear what Sullivan has to say as a principal.
I was going to Sullivan next. Funny, you read my mind. I was like,
Yeah.
Sullivan, you're a principal.
Yeah.
And I find that the schools are asking the teachers for their intentions earlier and earlier and earlier every year.
Yeah.
And there's a disconnect, because you want my intentions in October, but the vacancies don't start until January, February. So I tell you I'm leaving, but I don't know where I'm going. So I really can't tell you I'm leaving. How do we handle that?
Well, I mean, from a principal's perspective, we just ask for transparency because what happens is you end up being stuck thinking that, you know, you're going to have a certain staff member and then they leave at the last minute. That is very, very difficult for us to then find someone last minute. So, and especially if it carries on to the next academic year, that would be that's awful, because now you have a classroom without a teacher, or you may have a vacancy somewhere that is very important. So transparency is best from a principal's perspective. And I think we should have some type of integrity. So you should let your employer know what are your intentions, your best ability. And again, we are in uncertain times. So the market fluctuates as far as the amount of teachers available that are quality that you're looking for. So if you wait too late, you're going to get basically not the best, you know, pick of the litter if I'm trying to recruit in June, July, or even to the next academic year. So as an employee, I definitely think you should, you know, if you want to keep professionalism at the forefront, then you should give your school or your principal that fair notice.
But okay, let me ask Jonathan, in your experience as a principal back in the day, why is it that some schools handle this so badly? So a teacher says, I intend to move on, they're not sure, and then the school just switches on them. What's the cause of that?
Insecurity, maybe, from the point of view of the employer. The fact that, you know, they feel that it depends, again, you know, it's that professionalism. I think, you know, I used to have a, you know, mantra, no surprises. You know, that I will help you as long as you help me. So keep me in the loop of what's going on. The school intention forms, yes, you're right, they are going out earlier and earlier. I mean, schools are asking you for a yes, no, or a maybe. You know, the yes, you're going to stay. No, I'm not going to stay. And the maybes, they will move that line in the sand to a point where they think, right, now you have to make that decision, because after this, you're going to leave me in trouble. But yeah, I mean, some schools just see it as an allegiance, that, you know, you invest in that staff member, that member of staff has been with you for a period of time, and they see it as, okay, well, why aren't you staying? What's wrong with us? You know, so some of them think in that way as well. You know, but I wanted you to stay because I wanted you to take this on next year because, you know, you're one of my best teachers. And so, yeah, I mean, that emotional side does come into it. I know you try and remove emotion and be the professional, but, you know, as a head teacher, as a principal, you do invest in your staff and you do build up that relationship, and that, you know, and sometimes that does, you know, merge with other elements of who you are as a person. You know, you don't go into these roles to be a hard business person. You go into it because you are nurturing your environment, you know, the children, the parents, the staff. You invest you into all of these. So when someone says, I'm leaving, it does hurt sometimes. But like you say, the bigger organizations have HR, and HR have a policy. And the moment that is, right, you're now leaving, okay, well, I'm not going to invest in you anymore because you're going. So I'm now ready now going to invest in, right, someone I need to, is someone capable of replacing you as head of science? Because I'm now going to work with that person. So yeah, I don't need you to attend this meeting anymore because I'm working with him. This is next year's plan. So you start to feel already like, well, I'm still here, but the doors are now being closed and I haven't left yet. So yeah. And then also on top of that, you've got the ones that impose financial penalties,
Yes.
you know, which again is always interesting, but that's why at the time of employment, if we go back, you know, to when you are offered and you've gone through the hiring process, make sure that you have read those contracts. And, you know, if this is a job that you're going to stay in until you retire, you don't need to be that concerned about leaving. But if it's the next journey and the next journey, you need to be aware at the time of starting that contract, how do I end the contract?
Hmm.
You know, because if there's a financial penalty that could cost, you know, thousands of dollars, literally. I'm going through this with somebody at the moment, resigned in January for an April start, giving his school 3 months notice, but they see it as a breach of contract because he is breaking the contract through this period of time, and he is being hit with his end of year gratuity equal to about £4,000 and a 1 month penalty of salary, which is about £3,000. So him leaving, although he's given 3 months notice, is going to cost him £7,000.
Wow.
So yeah, and teaching is one of those jobs where, you know, you have the ministry in each country which will say you only have to give 30 days notice, and yet schools will supersede that with, you know, a term's notice, or if you're a principal, sometimes it's a year's notice.
It's such a hard one because as a teacher, you think that you have given years to a school and you want to move on, you want to do something different, and then you give your intention to leave, and then they start to shut the doors on you. You can't do meetings, or you can't do this initiative, or you can't do that. But you think, I'm the same person who's given you all these years of service. I've served my students, my colleagues, etc. The fact that I want to go doesn't mean I don't love my job or love what I do. I just want to move on. And so it's such a fine line and a difficult thing. But I want to pull it back to something else. Let's say it turns you are going to go. How do you decide who your reference should be? I know that sometimes they do ask for your direct line manager, the last one, as your referee, but say you have a choice. How do you then choose your reference? Is there some sort of best practice in choosing references, Sorka?
Generally, it would be like a senior leader of your current role. So I would say someone who's in a leadership position in your current role. I always say make sure they're professional. Always make sure that you've got the professional emails. I think it's also helpful to have somebody who actually is also a line manager too. So someone who's actually worked with you, maybe has observed you and knows you quite well. So whatever you're saying in your work history kind of reflects what they will have seen and hopefully comment on in their reference. But it also as well, let's say, like Jonathan was saying, you know, you leave under certain circumstances and maybe the relationship has been a bit affected by you leaving or something. That's also then you bear in mind. You might then, consider, who's going to best represent you in the reference as well. That's also a really important part, as well as who knows you, but also who's going to sort of probably best represent you and your talents and know you the best, and maybe talk about you at length. But I think I'd always recommend as well that you let someone know in advance that they're going to be your reference, so they can have something prepared. It's not like they just get an email randomly last minute. So it's good practice to let them know in advance. And I know in some cases, some people, you might say, they might want to take a look at your CV again, just to sort of see what your, the things you're highlighting, the skills you're highlighting. So they should know anyway, but also that they're hopefully, commenting on the same things that you're commenting on in your CV, that you're highlighting, that they're also singing from the same hymn sheet. But of course, it's all true, So just to emphasize back up what you've already said in your CV.
Yeah. I wondered, thank you, because I wondered, Suleiman, how far back would you accept a reference? Because I've left full-time school leaderships in 2018, but I still get requests from my former members of staff for reference. And I'm going, I have not worked in a school for that long. Why am I still your referee? How far is that a red flag for you if someone has a reference from way back and not a very current one?
Well, I think every school has its own criteria, but yes, if it's very, very old, outdated, then I would say that that is more questionable because you know, people change it. Well, hopefully you would have changed for the better. Hopefully you would have developed. So if you're getting a reference from 5 years ago, then if that's your best reference, what have you been doing for the last 5 years? You don't have anyone current that can vouch and say this person had this type of impact or this person has done that. If you don't have any current references, then it's not a good thing. I would say it's a weaker reference.
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? And Jonathan, help me with this one.
I was just
You're leaving your current school. It's not on great terms. You can't get a reference because your direct line manager or your head teacher is just not going to play ball with you. You guys had a bust up. You're not a bad person. You're a great teacher. You're a fantastic human being, but you cannot approach your current line manager for a reference because of personal differences. People have personalities and sometimes they clash. How do you handle that?
Openness again. I would say that if it comes to a point where you've been interviewed, normally references are not taken up until the person's actually had that interview, because not all teachers have told their current employer that they are having interviews. So it's quite often the case that, look, we've had the interview. We've now requested you for a second interview and we would like references.
Yeah.
I think at that point is a time then when you would discuss with your prospective employer about, right, well, look, when I resigned, this happened, and this happened. So that is why I've put down the deputy principal instead of the principal, because there's been a bit of a falling out there, but I'm being very transparent about that. Going back to something that just came up when you said, Leisa, that you were contacted from 2018. Depending on where the school is operating. So for example, schools in Southeast Asia, a lot of those in terms of their safeguarding processes are now asking for a reference or proof of employment from all of your previous employers. So if you are a teacher with 15, 16, 20 years experience, and you've worked during that time as a supply teacher, and then you did 2 years here and 3 years there and 4 years there and 1 year here, all of those have to be contacted for proof of employment as part of safeguarding. Also, what we're seeing as well is a movement away from people willing to commit in writing to a reference. If the teacher has not been made aware of any shortcomings during the time they were at that school. So, for example, if a principal says, Leisa was a great teacher, however, we often had complaints from parents because of the way in which she talked to her students. The teacher has a right to see that reference. If that reference then goes to the teacher and the teacher says, hang on a minute, where are you getting this from? You never, ever told me that you had any complaints from my parents because of the way in which I talk to the students. Then that straight away can be, a very sour moment. And more schools are sticking to the very basics. A lot of schools in the UK, if you write for a reference, will only say, Leisa was employed here as a Year 4 teacher from 2017 to 2021. That is it. There is no comment on the capabilities of Leisa during that time or anything. All they're doing is saying she was a teacher, or they may add one extra caveat along the lines that, and during this time, we had no reason to question her professionalism.
Wow.
And so it doesn't tell you anything about the parent relationship, the student relationship with colleagues, the willingness to meet deadlines, the taking on of, initiatives. They don't have to write any of that anymore. So references, it's a very interesting thing that's going on around in different places, especially if this person's been on a long-term supply contract, say in the UK. Those again will just say, yes, we engage with this person and they worked with us from this point to this point.
And
Wow.
Jonathan, do you think that might cause like an issue? For example, if you're a teacher and you're in Dubai and they contact your school you worked in the UK and that's all they send over?
Yes.
Is that being communicated? Like,
well,
it
would do, but I think so, because if the teacher, if the head here or the hiring manager in the UAE is then looking at 4 other CVs that have come in, or some references that have come in, and all of those have got 2 or 3 paragraphs, and and then this one comes in and just says Jonathan was employed here, and it's literally 4 sentences. You think, okay, well, that doesn't tell me anything.
You kind
of yeah.
That's really interesting.
I can see that.
Yeah.
So let me ask Solomon this question. When you look at references, is there anything that you look at a reference and think, no, this is either not a true reference, or because of what's being said in this reference, I won't take this applicant any further? What are some of those things that you've seen or could potentially see that would make you think, no, we're not moving forward with this one?
Well, I haven't experienced references that are kind of like what you're mentioning. So I can't say that I've come across a reference that was like off the wall and not professional. But I could imagine if the language is bad or if they're off the topic. Sometimes I filled out references with specific questions. So that kind of makes me interested also for schools that will they just not answer the question? I mean, I don't know, but there's specific questions. So if the response is not answering those specific questions, then that could probably be a red flag. But I haven't seen too many crazy references in my experience.
Yeah, I think by the time you get to that stage, you might have even already made your mind up about the candidate. Right. So I want to take it away from references, and I want to talk a little bit about the interview process. So you've gotten your CV through and you're now ready for the interview. Sorka, what are some interview tips that you can give to teachers who are about to go into interviews? Because we are in the interview season right now. So I'm going to start with Sorka, and then I'll go to Jonathan and then Solomon.
Yeah, so definitely preparation is key. Practice. Do your research, think about all the questions that could be asked, prepare your answers to them. I would say that it's a really good thing, which is online, if you practice answering them out loud, record yourself, see how you come across, if your hand gestures are too distracting, or how you're sitting up. One question that always comes up is describe like an outstanding lesson, or describe a lesson you recently taught, and that of course is going to be your best lesson you've ever taught. So make sure you can describe that in great detail, how you planned it, what resources you use, what tools, what apps, what were the results, if the students, when you assess them, what percentage were on or above, or was it part of a longer series of lessons, and how did you judge the students made progress? How did you support the students who have English second language or special education needs, differentiation? How did you stretch the gifted and talented students in that lesson? So really important to be able to describe how you teach and how you ensure progress and attainment with your students. And online, I think Post-it notes are so handy. Anything that you want to get in the interview, write it down. You put like the Post-it notes around your laptop so you don't forget to mention anything. It's always good to have a CV beside you, a copy of your CV, and do know it inside out, because the head teacher or the HR will have read through your CV, and some of the questions will be based off that. So make sure you know your CV really well, your dates. But really, like you would in person, have your dress professionally, look professional, and take a minute to greet the, it's nerve-wracking, but take a minute to greet the head teacher, the people who are interviewing you, maybe, and I would say practice as many questions as you can. Yeah.
Thank you. Jonathan, interview prep.
All very good tips. All of the above. Yes, and especially the one, and I often say this, and it's not cheating. Now with this sort of interface being more the norm, the idea, if you're a nervous person and you come away thinking, oh, I forgot to say that, why didn't I say that? Then have those little post-it notes just stuck around, have them stuck on the screen. It's your interview, and if that helps you to portray yourself as that professional that you are, then do that. Think of examples, and I go back to the very first thing that I mentioned about impact. Have those examples ready, because interviews are now very much about what have you done, not what the theory of teaching is, or how would you do this with a child. It's what have you done? How have you explored differentiation in a maths lesson in your classroom? Give me an example of a time when a child did this and how did you deal with it? Give me an example of a time when a parent said this and how would you deal with that? And it's not theory, it's all about what you've done and how you dealt with it. Some of the basics. Think of how you dress. I mean, yes, it's important. You're on a camera here, what do I wear? That's important. Be there. So if the interview is scheduled for 4 o'clock, don't log on at 4:02. Log on at 3:55 so that they can see, oh, Jonathan's already in the meeting room. I'll let them in now. So timing is important. Something I'm not brilliant at, because I try and get too much in, but it's answer the question, don't talk too much, and have the confidence to ask, have I answered that question? Because they may still go fishing for an answer if you ask that. Because if they think this person, I'm sure they know the answer, but they've gone off on a tangent. Right, so ask that, because nerves do get the better of you. Don't be too familiar, I would also add, as part of that interview. This is a professional environment. Schools are professional. So it's not that casual approach. Use appropriate language, and I would say that fits in with that. So just be aware of how you speak and the person you're speaking to. Don't be overconfident, and I'm not going to use any other word for that. I'll keep it as don't be overconfident, thinking, right, this school would be a better place if they employ me. That's not the right approach. And have readily prepared questions for that last question that usually, probably the penultimate question, where they say, do you have any questions for us? The ones who say, no, thank you, everything was fine, love you all. Have some questions that are based on some of the evidence that you may have picked up, either from the interview panels, because you can ask them questions as well. Don't forget, it's that two-way process. But have questions that may be linked to an external report, the recommendations of that report and the impact, something along, contractual questions, if this is a second interview, where you can actually ask then about, the salaries and the packages and things like this, but have things ready to ask at the end.
Yeah. Great points. I think we might even chop that up and turn it into sound bites and put it on social. Those were some brilliant answers from you and Sarka. Thank you. Solomon, interview tips. What can we do?
I think they covered almost everything. I can share just a few things from my experiences, a few do's and don'ts. So make sure you have a proper Wi-Fi connection. So if your home Wi-Fi is not too great, you might need to go to a quiet, nice little cafe, or vice versa. Don't go to a noisy cafe. But make sure your internet connection is right. Make sure you're on time or early. Do not have someone else in the room with you, because we can hear when people are whispering answers to you. Do not, it's okay to glance at sticky notes, but don't read an essay. All right. So if I see your eyes are pointing this way for long periods of time, or that way for long periods of time, I know you're getting your answers from somewhere else. It's not inside you. And I think, to add a bit to what Jonathan was saying about asking questions, it is value added when the conversation is kind of like I'm thinking of the tango. It's kind of like it's a kind of like a dance when you're asking questions and then we can answer questions and vice versa. So it's not just one way. So it's value added if you can shoot some questions that are relevant to the school, that shows your interest in the school. That shows that you've done your research on that school. So that is definitely a benefit or a plus for a candidate.
Brilliant. I'm looking at our time and we've got so much good stuff that we want to get through. But I'm gonna save some time. If you guys want to stick around with us for about 5 minutes or so at the end, we will get to your questions. When you come to the interview and they ask you about salary expectations, how do you respond to that question? Sorka, do you know a good answer that teachers can give? Because most schools have a salary scale, but they'll still ask you that question.
I think a good question for you to ask them is, well, what is your range for this role? So you get an idea of the salary range. So neither side maybe are committing to a figure, and also asking if they have a salary scale. That would be my tips. Yeah.
Yeah. Jonathan, what do we say when they ask us our salary expectations in the interviews?
Double it. Yeah. No, I mean, literally, I mean, it again, this is unusual because a lot of international schools do not have that transparency around their scales. If you were applying for a state school in the UK or in the US, in certain states within, that a 2-year teacher will earn this amount, and yes, they'll be on a different weighting if they're in London, but you know roughly what the salary is. But there's a huge disparity on salary in internationally, even within the same cities that we operate in. I mean, we know schools in Dubai that have, probably 40% differential in a salary for someone with the same experience. So it's being realistic, knowing the school, you've done your research, you know of what sort of school it is and where it is in terms of the social media profiles that follow every school, and there will be a reputation. And that, right, if my last school, I always ask my candidates to put on their CV their current salary so that your employer knows what your current salary is.
Jonathan,
and that,
no.
yes, it's a good point. Because a lot of people come back in and say, Jonathan, he's asking for this amount, but we need proof that he's on something similar at this moment in time.
But what about going up in salary? I think teachers should be able to move from one school where they were getting 10 and go to one where they get 20. I don't see anything wrong with that.
You may not, but the employers may do.
True.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, but I generally, if a school, certain schools aren't paying as much as other schools. Some schools pay more, but you may be changing your role not for just purely salary reasons. You're changing your role because of career development and what the prospects are with this new company, and the fact that this new company has already, or this new organization has already said they're going to open 3 more schools, and I would love to be a part of opening a new school. So it's not just salary, but yeah, I mean, generally salaries and teaching, it's the conversation does not really go as it does in other industries.
That was a question that just came in. I just thought I'd put it up there because I thought of it and someone was thinking exactly what I was thinking. Someone, Ampuma asked, and she said, what if the previous salary was better than the current one?
Yeah, well, again, it goes back to what I've just said. All international schools have their own pay scale. There may be something similar within an organization, but outside of that organization, they will be different. So yeah, then you're not moving for financial reasons. You may be moving for others. And generally, if at the point of interview, and it gets to the end when you are talking about remuneration, that school may say, right, we're only a new school. We've only got 120 students. We are not able to meet your current salary needs, but we can offer this, and this. Now, they may not be financial benefits, they may be professional benefits.
Right.
And that's why I go back to what I said is you don't look at this school being the end of the line. You look at, right, what is this school going to do to help me move to the next job? And I may take a salary cut of a small amount. Obviously, you've still got to sustain your lifestyle.
That's a good one. Here's a compliment coming in for you, Jonathan.
Jonathan, would you mind letting us know? Can't you be a principal again?
So
who's offering me a job?
We'll find out later on who that job offer is from. Suleiman, how do you handle the salary question when it comes up?
Well, I mean, from the teacher's perspective or from the principal perspective?
From the principal, like what makes you want to fall off your chair when you hear it?
Well, I hear it every single interview. And I can't give a definite answer because every school is different. And also HR usually handles that at schools, not the principal. So when asked what the salary is, every school has its own policy, its own criteria. And you would basically say it's based upon our scale with your experience, your background, and your credentials. And we do the best that we can do for each individual, depending upon the budget and the need at that time. But I think teachers, if you're driven solely by money, you're in the wrong profession. Go to banking, go to finance, go to the stock market. So of course and I think most teachers understand that, and they just want a salary that they can live respectably on. I think most teachers understand that. So if your total motivation or your priority is big salary, then I think that you're limiting your options, because there are certain schools that offer other things other than salary, and it's about developing yourself as a professional, so that you can be the best person that you can as an employee.
Yeah, I've seen some more questions coming in, but I think we're going to wrap up with one final question to this panel. You have gone through the interview, you've gotten over the salary question, you didn't, and now you have several job offers. How do you handle dealing with multiple job offers and making sure that you are making the right decision? Because I have friends who've come to me with several job offers, because it is quite easy to interview for several schools and get several offers now, because there is such a shortage, especially in certain subjects. I have a friend who is a physics and maths teacher, and he is getting offers left, right, and center. And so he's putting all these offers in front of me, and I'm like, oh my God, choose a country, any country. Like, I don't know what to tell you. What would you tell somebody who's got multiple offers? Sorka.
So what I would say is to really think about like your own personal, professional, maybe and financial goals, or look at your vision for your own life. Where do you want to be in a year, 5 years, 10 years? And then I would actually do like kind of like a checklist and put down the different perks of the school. So it could be things like professional development opportunities, which one is the best one. If you want to get rapid career progression, maybe a school, one particular school might be better for you than another. If it's, to do with salary, you can write that down. If there's a rent allowance, do you have to live in school accommodation, or can you live where you wish to? I'd probably even look at things like in terms of, how far away maybe do you want to be from home? How much does it cost to get back home? What's the expat community like? The school, does it suit, do you support their mission? And the student demographics, will you be able to really showcase your skills and, bring a lot of benefit to the school? So I'd have all these kind of categories and just really compare and see which one suits your personal, professional, and financial goals best. Because it all depends on the teacher and what, is it for career progression? Is it because they want to teach students of different nationalities? Is it, what exactly are your goals? And then find the school that matches up best. Because like Suleiman and Jonathan said, it's not necessarily always financial, could be lots of other factors. But really, I would actually do like a checklist and, weigh them all out and just see which one suits you and your goals best.
Yeah. Multiple job. Thank you so much, Sorka. Multiple job offers, Jonathan. How do we deal with that?
I think Sorka's answer was pretty much hitting every nail on the head there. yeah, it depends on your personal circumstances at that time and professional circumstances at that time. Are you doing it to be adventurous? Do you want to go and work somewhere that's, quite remote at this time in your life? And because it's, I just want to go and get a job on a Caribbean island and learn to scuba dive, and I don't really care about the salary because that's all I want to do for the next year. Or are you looking at, right, I want to work in a vibrant city where it's going to offer me career growth and it depends on your family circumstances as well. So that remuneration, the big package, is there family sponsorship? Are there school places for my children in this school? Are there flights? Are there medical? All of that, if I'm applying as a family. So all of that has to be taken into consideration. But the idea of having an Excel chart where you score against certain things, and then you sort of have a look and think, oh, that's a surprise. That one's come out at 38 out of 50, and the one I actually liked the best was I only scored it 22 out of 50. Ah, right, okay. So yeah, but I think Sorka's idea of scoring the position against set criteria, where you are, not everybody is after career progression. I know fantastic teachers who want to be class teachers and don't want to move on, but they just want to sort of experience different things. So yeah, and also if they have had multiple job offers, then they're doing something very well. And their interview technique is good. So the first thing would be I would, give them a round of applause and commend them on that and say, right, that you are somebody who is in demand and you need to think about the right thing for you at this time.
Yeah.
So if that was my friend and giving them advice as your maths and physics teacher, Leisa, that would be what I would say. Just where are you in your life now and what do you want next?
Brilliant. Suleiman, anything to add or?
I don't think there's anything I can add to after both of those answers.
Brilliant.
Can I add one more thing as well, Leisa? Sorry, and then when you're communicating with the head teachers, if you're not taking the offer, be timely in your response, be polite, be professional, because the world of expat teaching is very small, so you're going to bump into them at some point, or maybe in the future you might work for them. So always be, courteous, professional, and timely in your response to say no.
That is such a very, very good thing to add. Thank you so much, Sorka. That is an excellent thing to add. And yes, the world of expat teaching, especially in the Middle East, is extremely small. I've, over my years, watched principals move schools like you move chess pieces on a board. And so I know that eventually you will bump into somebody that you're trying to avoid. Thank you very much. You guys have been fantastic. I don't know how many questions we can field, but please continue putting your questions in the comment. I'm going to stop asking questions now, and I'm going to just go through and see if we can quickly field some of the questions that our audience has left for us. Sorka, this is more of a compliment than a question. Wonderful response. Leadership needs to be skillful to identify leaders, in teachers that shows and does not happen. So this is more of a compliment. But I do have a question here coming from Ramesh, and he's asking Mr. Suleiman, the pandemic has changed the learner's expectation and teacher's skill requirement. So what kind of candidates are schools looking for currently to meet both expectations? That's for Suleiman.
Well, I think we discussed is having that ability to pivot. So giving great classroom instruction in person, but also online in the event that we have to shift to distance learning. We're going through it right now. So you have to be able to utilize, online platforms, e-learning programs. You have to be able to you have to be very tech savvy and be able to engage learners even while you're not in the classroom face to face. So there is a whole new set of skills that teachers had to develop over these past 2 years. So the teacher of today has a lot more technical skills than the average teacher from 3 years ago because it's required. So yes, being able and being able to grow. So when COVID first hit, our teachers, or a lot of my teachers, they didn't know too much. They knew a few things, but I've seen their growth over a span of months where they became masters using things like Loom, Schoology, Google Classroom. They just became wizards. So showing that ability to grow and upskill at a fast pace is also something that is expected now.
Yeah. I think a lot of us have become, even people who are not teachers have just become really skilled at a lot of these tools over the last 2 and a bit years. So if you are at this point not able to use some of these IT tools, where have you been? And what have you been doing? Is my question. All right, this is a very long one, but I think what she's asking, Dr. Mary, she's asking why is it a problem to move from school to school? Maybe you have a 1 or 2 year contract here and you move to there. What is the problem with that? You know, especially if you're meant to be progressing your career and moving from one position to the next as you see fit. So why is it a problem, Jonathan, for them to have these frequent movements on their CV?
Something I always like, and again, when I'm giving career advice or CV advice, is put down reason for leaving. So if you have been at a school for 2 years and you left that one to then move to school B, and the reason was you left there to take up a head of department role. And then you left that school because you made a sideways move to maintain head of department, but this was a school that had 1,000 students, whereas the one before only had 400 students. So having that on a CV can help quantify that reason for leaving. And people go, I think it was Suleiman who actually answered one of the things that turns him off about a CV is the sort of the hopping around where you've done a year here and a year here and a year here. I think that in order to sort of bed yourself in professionally, you can't do that in a short period of time. It takes a while to get into the DNA of that school and find out how that school functions, and then to have impact and to only move on when you've had impact. If you made a mistake, and we all can do this in our professional lives as well, a school can portray itself as the ideal job, and you've done Sorka's little chart and it scored really well and you've gone there, and then you've been, let's just say the school misrepresented itself during the interview process. That's a very political way of me saying how that, yeah. And you find out that things aren't quite what they said they would be like. And then you leave after 4 months because you are not right for that environment. But you've still got a reason for leaving, and you put that onto your CV. I'm not sure, I'm going back to my interview tip now. I'm not sure I've answered the question on why it's seen as a negative thing. I think if you can explain why you're leaving, it's not seen as a negative thing.
Right.
So if it's for genuine reasons, I mean, relocation. You know, your school was last in Liverpool in the UK, and you were there for 2 years. Now you've just come to a school in Malaysia, and now you've come to here. And then you find out that this teacher's married, and her husband is an engineer who was working in Liverpool and then was working in Kuala Lumpur and is now working in Dubai. So she has followed her husband each time that he has moved. So it's understanding why the person has moved, not just look at a CV and go 2 years negative, 2 years negative, 2 years negative.
So you're saying that they should actually explain that on the CV itself?
100%, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, just literally put down reason for leaving.
I'll add one thing briefly, Miss Leisa. So as a school, we are investing in you as well. So when you come to work for any school as a principal, we want to develop you and we want to add to you as well. So if I feel like I'm investing in someone and then you're going to leave that next year, then guess what that is? That's a lost investment, lost time. So you have not been woven into the fabric of the school. And I put out resources for professional development for whatever it may be, and then you're off to the next. So that is a big, big issue. And I think if it is a rare occasion, then yes, just explain it. But if you're going from school to school to school to school, first of all, most contracts are 2 years. So how did you break all of those contracts? What were the circumstances that would justify you breaking those contracts if it's a country with 2 years. That's one thing to think about. And then, have you not bought into the school? Do you not believe in the school's mission over and over and over and over again? Or have you been ran out because of leadership, because maybe you're ineffective? So those questions arise to an employer. We have to figure out what are the reasons, what are the answers to these questions. So that's why it's a negative.
Yeah. Sorka has to go, but before she goes, there is just one question for her. The person says, I have a question for you, Sorka. Is it bad to have a detailed CV mentioning all the education skills and PDs I've mastered? For example, can my CV be for 5 pages? I have 9 years of experience in education and I am a lifelong learner. Yeah.
Do you know what? If you're teaching that long, you're obviously going to have achieved so many things, undertaken so many CPD. So I think it is great to have like a generic template that could be 5 pages long, we'll say, for example. However, you will tailor that CV to every school. So you won't need to include every single thing. So depending on the school that you're applying to, I mean, ideally it's most recent as well. You may not include CPD you did 9 years ago, unless it's particularly relevant to the role. So I would say ideal length, 2 to 2.5 pages. And remember to make sure your section for references, your section for extracurricular, and you've got your work history. Might have your personal profile. So make sure you get all those in, and your qualification section, your CPD section, to show that you are constantly updating your practice. So I would say tailor it to each one. And if you tailor to each school, you're not going to have every single CPD you've ever done in your life. So you can reduce it in that sense.
Yeah, thank you. Listen, we have run right out of time and we've gone into extra time. I want to thank you all for your questions. But before we go, I want to thank my esteemed panel, Solomon Akbar, Jonathan Price, Sorka Coyle. You guys have been absolutely brilliant for giving of your time and your expertise so freely to our audience. I want to thank everybody who's tuned in. If you have watched this live, please leave your comments on LinkedIn and on YouTube. We'll try and answer your questions. If you are watching this recorded or you're listening to this on the Teach Middle East podcast, please do leave us your comments or send us an email at editor@teachmiddleeast.com, and we will try to get your questions answered, even though it's already live, gone and recorded. So thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you, Solomon. Thank you, Sorka. It's been my pleasure. I'm Leisa Grace, over and out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.